So in the last week, I've had two videos that have shown up on my feed in my YouTube and Instagram. One is from a guitar player called Justin Myers, who's got a YouTube channel, and the other was from a colleague of mine called Adam Goldsmith, who's a guitar player from London, great player. Both were sort of talking about the struggles and the pitfalls of being a professional musician and what the reality of that is. And this is something I think about a lot. Due to being a professional musician, I've been a professional musician since I was about 21. I'm now definitely not 21, but I've got two kids who are looking at getting into the music industry. My son's an artist, a singer-songwriter, and my daughter is a singer. And my son's 23, my daughter's 17. She's at the start of her journey. My son's a couple of years in. But I talk to them all the time, and they've seen their dad growing up. You know, when they've been growing up, they've seen me. This is all they've ever known, you know, me being a working musician. Now, I've always thought of myself as a session guitar player, okay? That's what I always wanted to be. I wanted to be a session player. But Adam made a very sort of sobering point that actually we're not really session guitar players. We are guitar players that get to play sessions every now and then, right? And I'm only sort of talking about this because this is a question I get every couple of weeks. I'll get a message on either YouTube or Instagram, or when I'm teaching. How do I break into the session world? Now, you know, the answer is get yourself a time machine, travel back 40 years in time, and or 30 years, or whatever your decade would be, and you might stand a chance. These days, especially in the UK, anywhere outside of Nashville, I would say that kind of work isn't a real thing anymore, unless you're a string player, you know, unless you're an orchestral string player. There's a lot of them. They seem to be on a different sort of, their work is very different to a guitar player like myself, or if you're a drummer or a bass player or a keyboard player. Adam Goldsmith, he is what I would call a proper session guitar player. He gets booked to go in, and he's an amazing reader. He's a great player. He can play in many different styles. He gets booked in, you know, he's in Abbey Road or Air Studios doing sessions for films. You can put some music in front of him, and he knows what to do. But even he said, and he can do the job very well. Something that he pointed out, and I've known this for a while, there's only a handful of people that can do that in this country. There's only a handful. There's only enough work for a handful of people to be able to do that. If it's not one guy, it's the other guy. There's probably 4 people that do that job. One is Adam. The other one I know is John Paracelli, and they've got that work sewn up. That door isn't open for someone new to come in. You know, at the moment, that work isn't there, right? My sessions are very different. You know, I do get to go and do proper sessions in studios every now and then with other musicians for projects. But most of my work is done here at home. I'm lucky that I've got a couple of clients that keep me busy throughout the week, and I've had those clients for a good 10 years, maybe longer, okay? I'm not about to give them up. I will do the sessions for them as long as they want me to do it. You know, I will say yes to every session. So that kind of work, and I can imagine it's the same in Nashville, that work is fiercely protected by the people that do it. We're not going to open the doors up to someone new. If we can't do something, we're gonna offer it to the next person that we know, that we can trust, that can do that work for us. Anyway, that's the session side of it, right? Talking about the finances of sessions, okay? My session fees for certain clients have stayed the same for those 10 years. It's the same fee. It never goes up, and hopefully for those clients it never goes down. Okay, it's the same session fee. This is a brutal truth about doing a session for a record label, for example, like one of the majors like Sony or Universal, they're a pain in the ass to do, right? You'll get contacted by a producer and you'll be asked if you can play on a track. I did 2 for major labels last year, okay? I only got 2 in for major labels. All of my other stuff is for a major label, but it's through my client is the producer, not the label. But for these 2 artists that I played for last year, one was for Sony and one was for Universal, I believe. The first thing they do is they quibble about your fee. They'll talk you down on your fee, all right? My fee 10 years ago was probably, I don't mind telling you this, it was about £700 a song, okay? Now, you're lucky if you would get £450 or £500 for a day of recording as many songs as possible. That's with a label, okay? Then you will have to wait for that payment. So I did sessions for one artist last year. The song was released before I was paid. It was out on the radio before I was paid. I think I did the session in August, and I think I got paid probably June this year. So I did it nearly a year to get paid, right? Now, that's just the reality of it. That's just what it is. You have to chase your money constantly. I can't remember. I probably sent 20 emails for £400, right? That's how much that session cost. I'm only telling you this because you got to think about that. That's one job, and it took almost a year to get paid, right? It's just the way the system works. Universal, for example, have got a thing called Uniport, which is, I've always struggled with it. I know other people that haven't struggled with it. Uniport is a portal that you have to go through. So you do the session, you agree the fee, you go and do the session, the thing gets signed off, you sign the forms, and then you have to submit that you've done the session. To get a job number, you have to go through this portal. My experience with the website is it's really clanky and old. Every time I've joined, it never remembers my password. I have to put in a new password, and it will not allow you to use the last 18 passwords. You have to rejoin, apply to get to basically say that I've done this job. You'll wait weeks to get a job number, which you then are able then to send an invoice, which you then have to chase. And you have to remember to chase. And that's, partly my fault. I'm busy doing other things, which I'll lead on to in a moment. But that's the reality of doing a session for a major label. I did an album for a band, quite a well-known band years ago. There's some tracks that I've never been paid for, just because it's such a ball ache to get paid. You just eventually go, forget it. There's not enough time in the day. And, that's my fault, right? I'm not doing this for any sob story. I'm just telling you the reality of what it's like. Because I played on tracks that have been released since, I've got tracks that were released back in the 90s, mid-90s that I played on, right? When you play on a song that gets released, you register them here with an association in the UK called PPL. I'm not sure what it is in other countries, but it's called PPL here. It used to be called PAMRA, but now it's called PPL. So every time you do a session and it gets released, that gets played on the radio, either on the radio or the TV, you fill in the form online to say that you played on the track, okay? You put down the instrument you played. A lot of stuff I play 2 instruments on. I play guitar and bass on quite a lot of tracks. So you register for two instruments, which, funnily enough, doesn't count in the UK. It counts in other countries in the EU, but doesn't count in the UK. You can only register or claim for 1 instrument in the UK. What PPL does is it talks to all the other associations around the world, and it collects the royalty for your performance on that track. So every time it gets played on the radio, you get a payment. It's a tiny payment, but over the years, the more tracks you play on, the more that builds up. And, it can be a sizable amount, depending on if you played on some hits. So that's an income that comes in for me. That's a royalty income. Separate to songwriting royalties. Songwriting royalties are a very different thing. So I have that as a side. I have my PPL performing royalties. But I've been fortunate to play on a lot of songs that have been released. It does provide me with part of my income for the year. I'm really fortunate that I've got that. I've been building up the amount of tracks I play on since the mid-90s, sort of mid to late 90s. Sometimes you have a hit and those royalties from that hit might not come in for 3 years, right? Doesn't come in straight away. It's not like the money's collected as soon as it's played. It's collected over a period of time. Sometimes certain territories don't pay every year. So I think the income from France doesn't pay I think it's every 3 or 4 years. I think Japan's the same. So sometimes you get a spike in your payment, right? Which is amazing. It's a great feeling. You go, oh, well, Christmas is going to be okay this year. And then some years it's not. Sessions is one income. Royalties is another income, okay? Those two are kind of hand in hand, depending on the artist you get to play for and the records you get to play on. Okay, so there's one job, there's sessions, okay? I'm talking about this because, I teach in colleges sometimes. I teach at some of the music universities, and I think there is a bit of a rosy picture painted about what it's going to be like when they leave, when the students leave. Oh, you just enter the workforce. It's a slog. It's a slog, okay? You've got to be, there's a lot of right place, right time. There's a lot of right attitude. There's a lot about, well, one thing that's a must is you've got to be good. You've got to be good, okay? You've got to be able to provide a service. You've got to be a workable person. You've got to be able to, you've got to have really good people skills, right? Sorry if this all sounds a bit doom and gloom. I don't mean it to be doom and gloom. It's just brutal truths. Another part of my income is gigging, right? This year I've probably done, we're at the end of 2024. It's Christmas next week. I must have done over 100 gigs this year, okay? Which is, it's quite a lot of gigs. Lots of traveling up and down the country. I see gigging as one job, doing kind of freelance gigging with different bands. So I will do corporate gigs, okay? That's quite a large part of my income in the year. Most gig fees for doing corporates, it's kind of been the same. It's not gone up for years. In fact, some places it's gone down. One harsh truth, brutal truth, is when someone's looking to make cuts, someone's having an event, the first place they will look to make cuts is with the musicians, right? I don't know if you're out there and you're a musician and you found the same thing. They'll always say, oh, we're a bit tight on budget. Can you do it for a bit less? It's always us. It's never the lighting. Well, not that I know of. It's never lighting companies. It's never PA companies. It's never caterers. It's always musicians that come to first, right? And that's just, since I've been doing this job, it's always been the same. When I started out gigging in London, I used to do a little residency in Covent Garden. I think I used to get paid about £70 for 3 45-minute sets on a Friday night. I used to do it every Friday night. Now that was in the early 90s. So I don't mind telling you that my residency that I do in London, at Langhams, is £250 a gig. That's what I get. Right? And I love it. I'm not complaining about it. I love it. But I'm just giving you the reality of what that pays. Some places are more, some places are less. I was asked to do another gig recently for a very well-known venue in London. I'm not going to name it, but it's a very well-known venue, very famous. And it was for the late show that they have on a Saturday night, I think it is. And they were offering £150 for that gig. Now, for me, I don't live in London. It's an hour and 20 away from me to do that gig. It's not worth my while to go and do that gig. When I was younger, yes, it would have been worth my while. I think it's a very late gig. I would be getting home at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, which wipes out the whole of the next day for me. It's just not worth it. So that's another form of income, is gigging, right? Touring is another form of it. It's a different thing. I'm lucky to play for a couple of artists that we tour every now and then. So, I've been a member of the band Jamiroquai since 1999. We did a bunch of shows last year, but it was only 15 shows. And that is something I would call my priority gig. I love that gig. I love the band. It's looked after me for a long time. I feel like I'm a part of the band. I get to write songs with the band, and that's my main gig. Excuse me, I'm full of cold, as you can hear. I will always do that gig. I prioritise that gig as much as I possibly can. We have a tour booked for next year, for example, which is starting in November. So I know that that's what's coming up next year. I know that's a definite amount of income for me, that I know what's coming in. I can forecast part of my year. And luckily I play with another band called Brothers Strut. I know that there'll be some kind of tour with that coming up, and next year, coming up in early 2025, I've got a tour with a French artist, which takes me away for most of February. But when you're touring and you're away, what that means is your other gigs, your other sessions can potentially be in jeopardy because you're not available to do them, right? There is always going to be someone waiting to step in to your gig, all right? So I will always manage my time in a way that I can do as much as I can in that way. So yeah, I just had to, someone came to the door then and had some visitors in for a little while. So another part of what I do to make a living as a musician is I teach. I have to teach. Most musicians nowadays will teach as well. You know, you're sort of filling in the gaps of your work with students, private students. I do one-to-ones, and I'm also I get involved in doing some workshops and clinics. You know, I do some guitar clinics around the world. Actually, I'm fortunate to be able to do them around the world. What I'm kind of getting at is you can't just do one thing, right? If you're in one of the music colleges and you're coming out thinking, that's what I'm going to do. I don't know anyone really here, even in the States, unless they're in Nashville. But you know, if you look at someone like Tom Bukovac, he's expanding upon what he does. He does sessions. You know, he's very fortunate. He's amazing. Those people are really fortunate to be living in a place where that work happens daily. I'm also noticing that they're also having to do other bits and bobs, having their YouTube channels. You know, it all helps bring the other stuff in. One thing will lead to the other. I've been going on for quite a while now. What I'm just saying is, being a musician, I absolutely love it. I've got my dream job. It's what I always wanted to do, and I never want to do anything else. I don't think I can do anything else. And if you're in that, if that's the way you feel about being a musician, a guitar player, a bass player, a drummer, a singer, keyboard player, a producer, just kind of know that you're going to have to do, potentially, unless you land the dream gig, you're going to have to do other things as well. Whether you have another side hustle, another side job. I know my son has a job. That's where he makes his money. He has a job and he has to do music. He has a job so he can pay for the time to do the music that he's making. You know, it's a gamble. What he's doing is a gamble. And he's determined enough. He absolutely lives it and loves it, you know, but he's realised that he has to have another day job, another gig to pay the bills. We all have to pay the bills. Everything's gone up in price. I don't know about you, but, you know, I notice every couple of months I get one email from one of my subscription services, you know, like my phone bill, you know, every year. Just so you know, from September, your phone bills are going to be going up by this amount. Everything goes up in price except for the musician's fees, most of the time, right? I just wanted to give some brutal truths about what it takes to become a full-time professional musician. It really is full-time, okay? I wish you all the best of luck out there. I'm not saying this to put anybody off. I'm just doing it as a bit of a reality check, purely because I do get lots of messages asking me, how do I do it? What do I have to do to become this? How do I get the gig? How do I become a session player? There's no one way into it other than brutal hard work. Okay? Thanks for watching. See you soon.